I stood in front of the mirror and pulled my gym bag straps tighter. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw tired eyes and a slightly thinner face, but it was still me. Being sick had knocked me down harder than I thought it would. It had been weeks since I felt this close to normal. But today I was going back to the gym, getting back to my normal life, and getting back to being myself. That's what I told myself. My name is Murdy Trujillo, and I've done everything I was expected to do for most of my life. I got married young, built a house, and raised a son who is now someone I'm very proud of. When I woke up, DeWitt was already gone, but I didn't really expect that. He always got out of the house early, sometimes before I could say good morning. There was no note or text message. The only things that could be found were his empty coffee mug in the sink and the faint scent of his perfume. That was how we moved, moving past each other like they lived in the same house with strangers, but not much piss. I told myself it was okay. Things and people change after 20 years of marriage, but the silence had been louder and harder to ignore lately. Colton was waiting for me downstairs, leaning against the counter with his gin bag over one shoulder. He's my rock. He's been there for me the whole time I've been recovering, reminding me to eat, drink, and stretch. Colton made sure I wasn't alone while DeWitt was at work. "Ready?" he asked with that smile that always made me feel like everything would be okay, even when I wasn't as ready as I'll ever be. "Sure," I said, trying to match his energy even though my stomach was still in knots. When we stepped outside, the heat hit me like a wall. Summers in Australia were brutal, and even at this hour the sun felt like it was trying to melt the pavement. I could feel my skin tingling with sweat before we even got to the car. Colton asked me, "Are you sure you're up for this?" He looked over at me with that protective look I'd grown used to seeing over the past few weeks. "Have to be," I said, because I couldn't let myself feel weak again. I couldn't let myself keep feeling small. The Guardian was just like I remembered it, loud, bright, full of energy, the kind of place that made it hard to think too much. I liked that. People waved and said they were glad to see me back. I smiled and nodded, acting like their words didn't make me feel like I'd been gone for months instead of weeks. Colton stayed close, pushing me through stretches while keeping an eye on how much weight was on the bar. I did what he said and focused on how my muscles hurt and how sweat ran down my back. It felt good, almost too good. Like my body had been waiting for this to happen so that the pain and adrenaline would tell me that I was still alive and here. When we were done, I felt tired but lighter, like I had left something heavy on the gym floor. We cleaned up the machines and put our stuff away. Caroline texted me that I was ready to go home and collapse on the couch to let my body recover. Colton said that as we walked out the door, she was already cooking, so we should go straight there. I stopped because dinner at Caroline's meant making small talk, laughing, and acting like everything was fine. I wasn't sure if I had the energy for that, but going home meant facing an empty house and going to bed alone again. "Let's go," I said, waving my bag higher on my shoulder. Colton smiled and held the door open for me. The heat hit us again, but this time it felt different, less stifling and more alive. It was the first time in weeks that I felt alive too. Maybe that's what scared me the most. The heat made me sweat again by the time we got to Caroline's house. My shirt was stuck to my back and my hair was stuck to my neck. I felt sticky and uncomfortable, and I was suddenly very aware of how unprepared I was for dinner with friends. I looked at Colton, who looked just as sweaty but didn't seem to care. He was already taking off his shoes at the door and looking as at home as ever. "Caroline won't mind if we rinse off, right?" he asked as he walked toward the guest bathroom. Even though my voice was shaking, I said, "She's always told us to make ourselves at home." I still wasn't sure if I should take a shower here because it felt too familiar and close, but I couldn't imagine sitting through dinner feeling this dirty. My skin ached from the salt and sweat, and my muscles hurt in ways that begged for warm water. So I followed him inside, splitting off to use the bathroom attached to Caroline's guest room. I stood under the spray, letting the heat soak into my shoulders. The water felt like an apology to my body for pushing it so hard today. I closed my eyes, hoping to wash away more than sweat. Maybe even the nagging thoughts that had been creeping in since Colton had started spending so much time with me. I didn't want to admit how much I needed him lately. How much I looked forward to the jokes, the teasing, the way he always knew what to say to pull me out of my own head. DeWitt didn't notice when I was quiet. He didn't notice much of anything anymore, but Colton did. He always did. My mind drifted back to the arguments DeWitt I had before I got sick. He complained about the mess in the kitchen. I complained about him never being around small fights that built into something bigger, something we didn't know how to fix. And then I got sick, and he didn't even try to be there for me. It was Colton who made sure I had soup and cold medicine. Colton, who held my hand when the fever hit. He just asked me if I was okay being by myself, and then left for another work trip. DeWitt was my husband and Colton was my son, but lately the lines between them felt too blurry. "Mom, are you okay?" Colton asked me. "Yeah, I'm fine." I called back, but my voice cracked, betraying me. He paused and asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" I wasn't sure what to say. I wanted to say no to end the conversation and keep everything under wraps, but my chest felt tight and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. "Give me a minute," I said. When I stepped out, my hair still damp and my face flushed. Colton was leaning against the door, arms crossed and brows furrowed. His eyes saddened the moment he saw me. "Is rough day?" He asked something like that. I forced a smile, but it didn't stick. "It's nothing really." "It's not nothing," he said, pushing off the wall and stepping closer. "You've been off for weeks. You can talk to me, you know." The sincerity in his voice hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked away. "It's just a wit." I admitted, "I don't know how to fix things with him." "Maybe it's not on you to fix it. He said he should be meeting you halfway. If he can't see what he has what you deserve, then that's on him, not you." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. I looked up at him, and the intensity in his eyes made my stomach seep. My pulse quickened, and for a moment I wasn't sure if it was panic or something else. "You can't say things like that," I said quietly, but I didn't move away. "Why not?" "It's true." His voice was steady and soft. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. "You deserve more than someone who treats you like an afterthought." It felt like the heat from outside had followed us inside. My chest felt tight again, but this time for a different reason. I froze as he reached out and brushed a wet hair out of my face. Even though it was a small thing, it made my skin tingle. He said in a whisper, "You're beautiful." I stepped back. Colton, my heart beating fast. My voice was shaking. He agreed that we should get ready for dinner, but the look in his eyes stayed with me. As I turned away, I put my hands on the cool counter and tried to calm my breathing. I looked back at myself and saw red eyes and a flush on my face. I was scared because I didn't know myself. Remember to like this video if you're still here. People who liked this story should share it with others and subscribe for more. I promise there's so much more to tell. Caroline's house smelled like garlic and roasted vegetables. It was so warm that you couldn't feel out of place unless you already did. I stood in her kitchen with a glass of water and pretended I wasn't watching her, and her husband Greg move around each other so evilly. They looked at each other and made quiet jokes as they set the table, moving past each other in a way that looked like it was planned. Not fancy, but it was simple, and felt like home in a way that is strange to me now. It hurt more than I thought to watch them. Maybe it was because I knew I'd had that with DeWitt before, or maybe it was because I realized I'd never really had it with anyone else. "You're fine." Caroline's voice woke me up. She smiled, but her eyes were also on mine. Always careful to notice I told you I was sorry, but the gym hurt the corners of my mouth a little. I bet she winked and said, "Out there I saw Colton push you pretty hard." Even though she wasn't trying to mean anything, her words hit me hard. I sipped some water across the room to quench the sudden thirst in my throat. Colton was totally at ease when Greg said something that made him laugh. Maybe it was just me, or maybe he felt the same weight I did. When my phone rang in my pocket, it brought me back to the present. Work late and have fun. Do not wait. I looked at the message too long. It hurt even though it wasn't a surprise. There was another smile on my face as I put the phone back in my bag. Where do you need me? I told him to relax by pointing to the table. She said that everything was fine. There was no clear message about whether that should make me feel better or worse. Dinner was louder than I thought it would be. It was loud and funny when Carolyn laughed, and Greg kept the talk going by asking about workouts, vacation plans, and TV shows. Colton got into the beat quickly, and I tried to follow him, but my mind kept going off to other things. That moment in the bathroom when Colton looked at me and my heart raced kept going through my mind. That wasn't right. It couldn't be. I tried to push it away, but it kept coming back. DeWitt's text didn't help. The cold, sharp sound made me feel like I was alone, even though I wasn't. You're really quiet tonight, Caroline said. What's going on in your head? Cutting through my thoughts. Nothing. I spoke too quickly. I was just tired. I think Colton looked at me, but he didn't say anything since he didn't have to. He stared at me with such weight that it made my skin itch. I tried not to think about him as I picked at the roasted potatoes on my plate. That lock, I know. Caroline laughed and said, If you have something to say, please say it. I'm okay. I forced a smile again and said, I'm still getting my energy back. I was worn out after going to the gym. There were some truths in it, but it didn't feel like the truth either. Caroline looked at me like she didn't really believe me, but didn't want to say anything. That made me feel better because I wasn't sure if I could push myself right now. By the time dinner was over, it wasn't because I worked out that I felt tired. I said goodbye to Caroline with a hug, and Greg smiled at me as he always does. I wanted to hide how much I envied them. I went outside with Colton again, and it was hot. The silence between us was thicker than it had been on the way there. He asked, Are you okay? I said automatically after a few steps, but then I sighed and shook my head. Not really, no. He stopped moving, and I could feel his eyes on me again. 7 ones. What's wrong? 1, 5, why 1? Don't know. I did say that it was hard, but sometimes it's hard to see how easy it is for people like Caroline and Greg. He said it's not easy. It's only what you can see. There's something going on that you can't see, I might have said. That's not how it feels, though. You also deserve that. He said something simple. Someone who cares about you. My heart beat faster, and I had to tell myself to breathe. Even though he wasn't wrong, hearing it from him made it harder for me to ignore everything I was trying so hard to hide. I brushed past him and hoped he couldn't see how red my face was. Let's just go home, I said. The rest of the way, we walked alone, but I could still feel him next to me. He was strong and steady, but also too close and too far away at the same time. When we walked into the house, it was too quiet. You feel smaller than you are when there is a lot of silence around you. I kicked off my shoes and left my bag by the door. I can already feel my feet hurt. Colton came after him and threw his keys onto the counter with a soft clink. At first, neither of us spoke. The space between us felt denser than it should have been. After a long pause, Colton finally asked. I told her I was hungry and that it was true that dinner at Caroline's had seemed more like a chore than a meal. My stomach was telling me it wasn't happy that I hadn't eaten half of the food on my plate yet. He smiled and smiled his way into the kitchen. He came back with 2 drinks and a bag of popcorn. He told me not to judge after I raised a question. That being said, popcorn is a perfectly fine evening snack. I told you. He gave me the bowl, but I'm going to take the buttery pieces you always make, he said with a smile. Like we'd done 100 times before, we sank into the couch legs and tucked them under us. But tonight felt different. Somehow Colton seemed lighter, but I couldn't get rid of the stress in my chest. Being in the moment was important to me, so I let myself enjoy the laughter that followed as we fought over the Yes. But tonight felt different. Somehow Colton seemed lighter, but I couldn't get rid of the stress in my chest. Being in the moment was important to me, so I let myself enjoy the laughter that followed as we fought over the last handful of popcorn. You lied to me. I hit him with my fist. The last piece was taken from my hand by him. I was fair. It was back, and he dodged the pillow I threw at him. You're really angry. I moved faster. You want. I picked up another pillow and swung again, but this time I caught him off guard. He laughed, so I grabbed one too. Before I knew it, we were wrestling on the couch, throwing pillows all over the place, and laughing so loud that it filled the room. That was the first time in weeks or months that I laughed so hard. He held me down by wrapping his arms around me, and it wasn't because I couldn't breathe that I caught my breath. It was because of how heavy he was and how strong his grip was. He smiled down at me and said, I got you. But when he saw my face, his smile faded and we both stopped moving. The only sound in the room was our breaths, and I knew he could feel my heart beating in his chest. No, and I didn't move. He asked in a low voice, Mom, what's wrong? I suddenly swallowed hard because I didn't know what to say. I'm not sure. I believe you do. It hurt me that he could see right through me, so I closed my eyes. My voice cracked as I said, I feel stuck and alone. He can't see you, so I don't know how things got this bad. Colton told her in a strong but soft voice, That's not how you should be seen. He looked at me so hard that I almost passed out when I opened my eyes. Took the air out of me. He cut me off, but that doesn't change the fact that what I said was true. My chest got tight, and tears came to mind, but I blinked them away. It's not that easy. He said, Maybe it is. You're not happy, and you should be. He pulled my face back toward him with his hand when I turned away. His thumb lightly touched my face, and the kindness in that small act broke my heart. I took a shaky breath, and then I couldn't stop myself. I put my weight on him. I let him pull me close. I didn't think about what it meant or where it could lead. I let myself feel safe, warm, and wanted. It wasn't loud or hopeless. It wasn't careless. It was calm, steady, and all too real. We can't, I mumbled again. But this time my body lied to me and stayed where it was. I know, he said, but he and I both wouldn't let go. Remember to like this video if you're still here. Tell someone about this story who might be interested in it, and sign up for more. I promise I have a lot more to say. I woke up tangled in the blankets, where Colton's arm had been before he left. My skin was still warm. His cologne left a faint scent in the air, and I let myself stay there for a moment, eyes closed, heart heavy, and spinning in my head. It didn't last, though. Being sat up and pulling the blanket over my chest like it could protect me from the reality I had made fell on me like a weight. I didn't pay attention to my buzzing phone on the table because I knew it was DeWitt. Another note, another reason, and another glimpse of what led me to this point. Colton was not there. I could hear the floorboards downstairs creaking, but he wasn't coming back into the room. That could have made things better or worse. It felt cooler in the kitchen than it should have. Even though the windows let in a lot of morning sun, a glass of water seemed like it might break in Colton's hands as he stood by the sink with his back to me. Good morning. As I spoke, my voice was not as loud as I meant it to be. He didn't turn around right away. His eyes looked darker when he did that. He put the glass down and leaned against the counter arms. Crossed. He said, Let's talk. I said yes, but my stomach hurt. I know that he let out a sharp breath and shook his head last night. I quickly said, It won't happen again. But I wasn't sure if I believed it. He looked at me for a long time, as if he wanted me to say something else to explain myself. But how could I say that I was lonely? but I felt like no one saw me, and that I felt something real for the first time in months. He said in a softer voice, "I can't be that for you. You do know that, right?" I nodded and swallowed hard. I never meant, he cut me off and said, "But you did. We both did." I'd blinked back tears that were about to fall on you. "I'm sorry too." He moved away from the bar and grabbed his keys. "Give me some room," he said. I wanted to shout at him to stop and tell him that we could fix this and that this wasn't the end of everything, but I didn't. I just watched him walk away. The next few days were hard to remember. DeWitt knew something wasn't right, but he didn't say anything. He might have thought it was still about my healing, or he might not have cared enough to ask. No matter what, I just couldn't tell him the truth. Therapy was what I suggested instead. They didn't say they were sorry, but it was a start. He agreed almost too quickly, as if he was waiting for me to say something. The first meeting was followed by the second. As routines took the place of real talks, we talked about how disconnected we'd become. I told them I didn't feel seen anymore. DeWitt said he would do better. I said I would give him the chance, but I wasn't sure if it would be enough. Colton didn't go. He sent a few short, nice texts, but it wasn't the same. They felt like we would never talk again, and I hated how much I missed him. I'm thinking about what will happen next as I sit here alone. DeWitt tries therapy, but it feels like putting a Band-Aid on something that can't be fixed. There's no spark that should make it worth it.